so glad you are back for another episode of the Happy Whole You podcast. And today I have Miss Robyn Simpson, who is a mom of two. She's a researcher, a writer, and an entrepreneur with a deep passion for neuroscience, developmental psychology, and human development. And let me tell you guys, she is on a huge mission. She's the founder of Choose Your Tude, like attitude. She's the creator of the Kind Community Project, and she would love for you to join the Global Kindness Activation. I'm excited to share her with you. We had such a great discussion, and oh my gosh, you guys, it is all about having courageous kindness in our hearts and in our beings and spreading that out and sharing it with the world. And she has some great tips for you to do that very thing. Here we go. All right, Robyn, thank you so much for joining me today on the Happy Whole You podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, you sparked my interest. I think your profile came across to me on LinkedIn, or somehow we were connected. You know how the world of social media works. And I was just loving when I was seeing some of your posts and the things that you talk about, that I was like, I need to interview this woman on the podcast because you have good things to share. So, thank you for being here. And I would love for you to just share with everyone just a little bit about yourself and how you got doing the work that you do today.
Okay. Well, yes, I do love the way that LinkedIn works and other social media, especially when you dial it in for if you manage your algorithm so that it's feeding you positive stuff, that's great. So, as you can see on the screen here, I am the founder of Choose the Tude, which is all about attitude and personal responsibility. So I've had that business for quite some time. And also, I have created the Kind Community Project, and that's really my main focus these days. And I'll give you the very short backstory to that one. A while back, I was working in corporate. So I've had my own business for many, many years. Then I tried corporate again. It's not really my thing. But while I was there, my daughter was in before school, after school care, as well as full-time school. And unfortunately, she was being bullied really, really badly. And I guess as a mum, I wasn't prepared for it to happen at the age of 5. I knew it would happen at some point, but not quite so early. And so it sort of started me on this path of looking into what are we doing in the world to truly prevent damaging social trends such as bullying. And I looked at Australia, which is where I'm located these days, and I looked in New Zealand, which is the country that I'm from, and I looked at the UK, and I looked at America and Canada, and the trends were unfortunately all spiraling out of control in the wrong direction. So it really got me interested in researching, well, what are the true preventions for bullying, and why have our societies become so toxic, and what can we do about it, rather than just complain. I'm one of these people that will get up and do something about it. So that started me on the path of Choose the Tude again, and then building the Kind Community Project. So it's been an evolutionary journey, and it's a really positive one. We don't focus on the bullying so much. We focus on the true prevention, the antidote, which is kindness. So hence it's called the Kind Community Project, and we inspire people to create kind daily habits at home, at work, and in the community, because it's all based on neuroscience and psychology. And there's one fact in particular that we base our content and our programs and things on, and that is your mind can hold one thing at a time. And if that thing is kind, then there's no room for nasty. So we're inspiring people to have kind thoughts and think kind things and do kind things and pass it on.
Oh, I love that on so many levels. It's so important. And especially, yeah, when we're kind to ourselves and we have kindness at the forefront, that's what will come out for all of us. I mean, I wrote a book called Stop Bullying Yourself, which is that self-bullying, right? We have to be kind to ourselves. So I love that. So what is, your whole self, like taking care of your whole self. What does that mean to you?
Okay, so when I talk about the whole self, I'm talking about, and I'll use myself as an example in my life journey. I've been on the planet for over 5 decades, and so I've sort of evolved over time. And when I was younger, I was very like my confidence levels weren't very high. I was very shy, and so I picked up on different lessons from different people. And one of those lessons that I picked up early on was that I needed to uh, be certain ways in front of different types of people in order to be accepted. Now, a really interesting thing happened when I was about 18 years old. I was working for a gentleman called Bernard, and Bernard was, he was amazing. But he said to me one day when we were going out to see a client, he said, Robyn, see that person over there, we're going to a meeting and it's a professional meeting. How would you treat this particular person and how would you be in front of them? And so I explained I'd be very professional and what have you. And he was like, okay, great. Then he pointed out a little old lady on the side of the road as we were driving past. And he said, what about her? I said, oh, well, I'd probably adjust how I was being. And, uh, you know, my parents always taught me that I should adjust the way that I was being with the type of people that I was being with. And he said to me, well, how do you think that would be if both of those people knew you and they were in the same room with you and they saw you being a different person with other people? And it kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I went, yeah, that's okay. That does not come across as very authentic or trustworthy, does it? So he highlighted this back for me in a very gentle and caring way. And I guess from there I've taken on a different perspective or paradigm about the whole you. Now it has taken a long time to, be confident and build the confidence in my true self and learning about my values and really embodying my values and those things. So it's not you learn the lesson and it's done kind of thing. It's a whole life experience. No, and it did take me a very long time, but I when I talk about the whole you, I'm talking about just being authentically you, really, really being in touch with your values. It doesn't matter whether you're at work, in a social situation, meeting new people, in a family situation. And there is a lot of neuroscience and psychology behind why it's really healthy to show up as your whole self, no matter what the context. So that's, yeah, basically be your true authentic self, bring your whole self. Don't put these personas on in terms of, I'm a professional at work and therefore I need to act this way. Now I'm at home and I'm a mum and therefore I need to act this way. If you can bring your whole self to all of those situations, it will make life a lot easier.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And it doesn't impact the body, like, because I go always back to how the brain impacts our biology and our health. And when you can, yeah, just be yourself, it's like so freeing too. When you're not hiding anything or trying to posture or whatever, it's like, it's just, life's just easier.
Yeah, it is. And look, you touched on, how it impacts the brain. And, there's a lot of neuroscience and psychology out there, research studies that prove that if we have a disconnect if we're not living in line with our values and there's a disconnect, then it is actually, well, one, we're building neural pathways that are not conducive to building our own character. Well, it's building a character, probably not our true self.
Yes. Yes.
So we're building up the pathways in that way. But also it can actually cause stress, which that then releases cortisol. And if we're constantly living in this state, then, prolonged exposure to cortisol creates disease.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. That's 1000% my wheelhouse is how our brain impacts our biology and it makes us sick. And I'm my listeners know I believe that any physical ailment we have has manifested over time due to an emotional blockage in the body. Um,
Mm.
and it's just every client that I see, any physical thing that they are going through, we can tie it back to an emotion and a mental aspect. And it's so fascinating. And it's like, if we could really just wrap our heads around the way we think about our life, the way we speak about our life changes our biochemical makeup. Like we can think ourselves sick, we could think ourselves happy and whole. Because I mean, if we think of something scary, we have a physical response that's changing our biochemistry. If we think of something like my dogs, if I think about my dogs at home right now, all three of them, who knows what they're up to? Probably trouble. It brings me joy. It makes me happy. And so it changes how we feel inside. So I think, I love the more I think people talk about this, the better, because I think there is a huge disconnect that we think our physical ailments are completely separate to how we're thinking. We think our physical ailments are separate from how we're showing up at work, and we're all one. So that wholeness you talk about is like, I love it. It makes me so happy to hear that.
And
Oh, go ahead.
And I think just leading on from that, I can talk from personal experience in terms of the cortisol, prolonged exposure to cortisol. In that role that I was doing when my daughter was being bullied, that was high pressure, like extreme stress, constant for 4.5 years. And uh, unfortunately, it did actually culminate in a very nasty disease. And so, yeah, I'm a living example of doing that to myself, but also I'm a living example of removing that and changing how I'm being. I removed myself from the employment situation that was causing the stress. And I also went straight back into my meditations and my self-care and all of those sorts of things, and looking at ways to reduce the cortisol levels and really manage them. Cortisol, we do need it. I'm not saying that we need to reduce it completely.
Yeah.
We do need it, but we don't need those excessive levels that are going to cause disease.
Yeah. Yeah. No, cortisol, it's a hormone. It's one of our friends. It's the hormone that wakes us up in the morning and gets us going. It's just when we have too much of it, like too much of anything, it can cause distress and dis-ease in the body. So, um,
Yeah.
I love that you talk about the courageous kindness. So share more about what that is and how that can help us.
Right. Look, I am really passionate about courageous kindness. So, as I said at the beginning, I started the Kind Community Project because of bullying. The antidote to bullying is kindness. And when I talk to business people, I'm very passionate about creating kind cultures in the workplaces in particular. And the reason for that is that everyone at a workplace is a human being. We're all role models of some sort. We may be parents, we may be partners, whatever it is, managers, leaders, etc. And so it makes sense to me, if I'm going to make a lot of impact, then I go to those centers of influence where there are a lot of people to influence. And so companies are a really great place to start. And so courageous kindness is about, let me take a step back. Kindness can be confused with nice, and it can be seen as soft and fluffy. And yes, parts of kindness are soft and fluffy and comforting and warm and all of those things, which is really great. But sometimes, and quite often actually, if you think about it, we really need to do the right thing. We need courage to be kind. So I'll give you an example from, let me see. There was a time when I needed to have a very uncomfortable conversation with a colleague of mine. She was in my team. She wasn't performing. She was obviously unhappy. Things were just not going well for her, and therefore that was playing out in her work, and it was impacting my team, and my team were getting frustrated. So the ripple effect was in a very negative way. So in order to be kind to myself, because it was frustrating me as well, and raising my cortisol levels, as well as my team members, as well as her, we needed to have a really uncomfortable yet kind conversation. And, all it took was for me to have the courage to have that conversation in a way that was empathetic to her and to really sit and listen to what was going on with her. Now, courageous kindness is often you're going to use that when you need to listen. You ask a question, you really need to listen to the other person's, not just the words, but the whole thing that they're saying, the way that their energy levels are, their micro responses, those sorts of things. And so listen on all levels and really listen until you understand their point of view. And that's true empathy. And empathy is one of the big parts of kindness. But, sometimes it does take a bit of courage. And parenting is another one where you're a mum, I'm a mum. Parenting really does take courageous kindness.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that you gave that description of that because I think that, yeah, it's kindness could be confused as also, yeah, being like a pushover or, but yeah, the right kind of kindness can take some courage. I love that. That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
And I guess the other part of it is the whole kindness to self. That can take a lot of courage. It took me a very long time to realize or learn and really embody the fact that, being kind to myself is not being selfish. But it took courage to change my paradigm on that. And, being what I believe now is being kind to myself is being of service to others. And I know this since, I really learned it with the last, with that health hurdle that I mentioned, where uh, after decades of being the person who is caring for others and putting others before self, it really culminated in a time where I couldn't do that. I was not able to. I wasn't physically able to, and so that was a really interesting, mind bending time for me because I wasn't used to other people looking after me. That felt really uncomfortable. So be I needed to be able to change my paradigm on that and allow myself to be supported by others. And it also taught me that through that time, my kids were still quite young. And it's like, wow, I don't want them to grow up without a mother. So I need to learn to put myself first and do that self-care stuff and be courageous enough to say, no, sorry, I can't do that right now. I need to take care of myself. Once I'm fine, then I can look after you. So yeah, there were lots and lots of learning lessons and learnings in that experience.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you had all of them because that's why you're doing what you're doing today. And I think that that's like the ultimate courage, right? Is to recognize that one, we all have a past and it doesn't, and sometimes it doesn't feel good. Oftentimes
Mhm.
we have the things that don't feel good, the shame, the guilt, all of that. But to step in and give yourself kindness, to take the lessons from that and create it into something bigger than ourselves and pay it forward is like, I think that's like the ultimate thing that we should all be doing. But when we hide behind, that shame and that guilt and all those things, and we're not kind to ourselves, we never get a chance to heal. And if we don't heal, we can't serve. And yeah, so I love that. And I always find it really fascinating the stories of so many people that I interview, and there's no shortage of this, is that people that I find that are doing extraordinary things, it all stems from something that was dark.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it never fails. Like, it never fails. And especially people that are doing something big and authentic, and like you can feel your energy of love towards this project that you're doing. And really, it's a movement. And I want to commend you on that because I think that that is just absolutely amazing. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess, a couple of things popped into my head as you were talking then. And one is that as parents, we are role models, and therefore, we need to role model what's healthy for our kids, and self-care is healthy. So so now I've learned that lesson, and I am helping my kids learn that lesson as well. Um, and the other thing is, we don't know life if we haven't experienced dark. If you don't see if there is no contrast, then everything's just vanilla. Everything's plain. So I think we need those challenges to expand us to the next level and catapult us, or be that catalyst for the growth. And I guess the third thing is, thank you for calling it a movement, because I really believe that the more of us that are, it doesn't matter where we are in the world, it is a global movement, and it's not just me, it's a we thing, and there are many, many people involved. And I just feel like there seems to be a bit of a shift. Maybe it's because I'm managing my algorithms. But there definitely seems to be a bit of a shift in spaces where people are really standing up for kindness, and they're starting to understand courageous kindness. And I'll take an example where we're about to launch a campaign. I'm not sure when this goes to air, but we are about to launch a campaign that will be an ongoing thing where people can join the movement. And when something unacceptable is happening in the world that we don't agree with, that is unkind, then we can activate this movement of people to stand up and show, no, hey, that is not acceptable. Kindness is what we need to be doing here. And rather than just letting the media take over and tell us that, this nasty stuff is happening and that's that, it's like, no, we should be able to stand up together, no matter where we are, and go, no, that's not acceptable. We stand for kindness.
yeah, yeah. And I think too, it's like, it's so easy to get caught up in some of the negativity, like with the news and stuff, because our biology is hardwired to scan the world, to look for danger and then avoid danger. And then also our brains are fascinated with danger, that like when you're driving down the road and you see an accident, it's like you're looking, like you want to know, because in our DNA it's like, hey, we don't want this to happen to us. What do you need to know about that so it doesn't happen to you? So we get like so fascinated by, like, I mean, on the TV, there's like all these serial killer shows and like all of these things. It's like just wild. Some of the stuff that's out there, which I don't participate in that, so it doesn't show up in my algorithms, which maybe now that we're talking now it might, because there's um but it really is the reprogramming. And I think, I love that you say, like, in your brain and in your mind, when you're in kindness, that's the only thing that can exist in that moment. And so I think that's such a great practice to go back to, is like, how can we pull kindness in the moments where we're finding ourselves outside of that?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And look, there are a few different things. I've been teaching my kids since they were very, very young, what I call the 2-minute tood choosing technique.
Ooh, I gotta hear this. I like it.
So, so TOOD is short for attitude. And we sort of generalized it a little bit, and attitudes sort of encompass their emotions and things like that. So when I'm talking, when they're like 3 years old, I was teaching them this. And so if they were feeling a negative thought or emotion, we'll say that's below the line, a negative one, then what they need to do is be aware of it. So the first part is teach them how to become aware. So to feel the feeling, and that's okay. We're not shaming it or naming it or anything like that necessarily. It's not bad. It just is. And it's actually a really good indicator that we've got an opportunity to change how we feel. So then the next thing is to teach them to flip it over to what's the opposite of that. So if you're feeling sad, it's happy. Or, if you're feeling anxious, it's confident. So trying to find the opposite. Now, obviously, for a 3-year-old, opposite is a big word, but you can coach them through these things.
Yeah.
And so once they do find that opposite, then we get them to anchor it by thinking of a time that made them feel really happy. What were you doing? Who were you with? What did it feel like? And then amplifying that. So it's an anchoring technique, but it's a pattern interrupt. And basically what we're doing is, instead of staying and building those synapses in the below the line negative side of things, we're flipping over and we're doubling everything or tripling everything in the positive. So it kind of neutralizes what happened before and builds up the positive side of things. So that's how we can, and if you do this constantly, like repetitively, I'll say, not constantly, but repetitively, yeah, you reprogram yourself. So it just becomes part of who you are. And we still need those the emotions that don't feel good, and I don't think we need the attitudes so much, but we do need the emotions that don't feel good, the feelings that don't feel good, because those are indicators that we need to take a look at something.
Yeah.
They're our guides. So, I'm grateful for them, but I don't have to spend my life
Right.
wallowing around in them.
Yeah. They're just nudges to check on, take inventory.
Yeah.
Sure. And I
Powerful and silent navigators, and but all of our attitudes and emotions and things are silent navigators, whether they're positive or negative. And some of them are quite neutral.
yeah. Yeah. I love that you use anchors, because I think anchors are great, and you create this visualization around them. Because once we go, like, our brains are just so powerful. So when we can create an image, the visualization, it really takes us out of that fight or flight, which is really where we need to be.
Yeah, and it does actually, once we can think of a time, like a specific time, or if we can't think of a specific time, we can imagine what it would be like. That's when the other neurochemicals start to fire, and that's when we start to rewire the brain. So and kids get it. They really get it, especially if you guide them with the questions. And it's like, okay, so who were you playing with? Oh, Johnny. And Johnny's great fun. Why do you love playing with Johnny? So you're kind of distracting the mind from the negative and refocusing on something else that they enjoy.
Yeah, I love that.
And I've got to say, adults should be using this too.
Yeah, 1000%. I mean, our brains are literally, I always say, strongest pharmacy on planet Earth. We can hack different hormones and, neurochemicals with shifting a single thought in 150 milliseconds. So there is
That
power in our mind. And so we can make ourselves feel well, and we can make ourselves feel unwell. Uh, Okay, so any last minute tips that you would like to give, and especially in terms of the workplace, because I know that you specialize in the workplace as well, and being courageous kindness at work. So, what are some things I guess people could do at work that helps them show up with that courageous kindness?
Okay, so there's a few things. One would be to choose where you spend your time and energy, and who you surround yourself with. Um, and part of this also comes back to being your whole you. So some of the work has to be done outside of work in order for you to be able to show up at work the way that you want to show up, and to have the courage to stand up and be uniquely you at work. So a lot of it is values exercises, and doing those sorts of things prior to getting into the workforce or into the work environment. But you have choices. Like, you can have mini breaks. You can do brain breaks, or um, just a quick refresh. If you're getting into a situation where you feel anxiety growing, or tension or something like that, have the courage to take a moment and reset. Now, that may look like, if you're in a meeting, Let's imagine you're in a meeting with 10 other people. It's in a boardroom, and tension is growing, or something is rubbing up against your values. Then you can, in your mind, just either write something on a piece of paper, or it's just that remove your brain from what's going on, reset it by writing a word, and whatever your word is, choose a word that really makes you happy. And then you can come back and concentrate on what's happening, but from a reset point of view. The other thing is you don't need to take on other people's stuff, and that's a big lesson. I love, I think it's Rick Hansen is the guy who said, be uh, Teflon to the bad and Velcro to the good, and basically let the other stuff slide and only take on the good stuff. So that is actually a little mantra, which is something else you can do in the workplace, is have your own little mantras like that. And I have used that. It's like I have a little, if someone's doing something that I'm not quite agreeing with, or they're trying to coerce me into doing something and I don't want to, then I'm kind of like, no, I have this little mantra that goes on in my head, and that'll reset. And it's, it allows me to take that momentary break to interrupt the energy that's going on, and then reset and start from where I want to start from. So it's reclaiming my space.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of work in that. I think finding the love in your work. Now, this is an interesting one because it's a lot deeper than what most people would think about with work. But you may be in a job where you don't enjoy your job, or you don't particularly love the job, but there will be things that you do throughout your day that do bring you joy. They might be tiny little things. It might be that you're mentoring someone, and that part of your day gives you joy. So there's a book called Love and Work, and I can't remember the name of the author off the top of my head, but it really goes into this in a big way, and I really enjoy this book, because it does talk about finding the red threads, which is, what are your loves, and you really only need 20% of your day or your work to be red threads. So it's a matter of really figuring out what those red threads are. And that will help you get through work as well. And if you're finding yourself in a toxic situation, look, the best thing I can do, sometimes it's hard, but this is where courageous kindness comes in. If it's really that toxic and it is increasing your cortisol levels to the point that you are disengaging, or your personality is not where you would like it to be, you might be getting short and sharp and angry with people, or even with yourself, then that's a big sign to say you need to make a courageous choice and make a change.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes they're big changes, sometimes not so much, but and courageous kindness at work is often about conversations, having the courage to start a conversation and make sure that conversation you can be authentically the whole you in that conversation, and don't let anyone bully you.
Yeah. Yeah. Conversations. I think that is, it's, it's language. It's having the words. Like when I work with people and we're, one on one, it is really interesting how, they can have this thing going on and it's like this huge thing in their mind, and we're talking through it. And then once we unpack it and we find the language around it to speak to the other person and share with them how they're feeling, it feels so much better. They don't feel as heavy. They don't feel as dense once they have the language and they have the conversation. Cause I mean, I think I even know with myself, like I'll think of, I get to have this conversation. I'm choosing to have this conversation. And as I'm, thinking about it, it's like all this stuff. But then once I like go out and I bottom line what I need to say in the conversation and then I have it, I'm like, oh, that wasn't that hard. you know?
Yeah, I used to use in my previous role, I was doing high level negotiations, and I had a negotiation grid that I would work with, a template that I created. And I've actually used that for hard conversations that weren't necessarily to do with negotiations.
Yeah.
And it's all about looking at, you know how you're feeling. So look at the root causes. What is actually causing you to feel that way? And you do need to look at it a little bit from a detached meta point of view. But if you can pin down the root causes or what you think the triggers are and write them down on paper so they're not in your head, write them on paper so it's detaching from you. And then you have the power to look at them objectively instead of subjectively or emotionally. And once it's out, the next thing you can do is go, okay, so if there's another person involved, you can go, okay, so what could possibly be going on for them? And what could be triggering them, and how are these two things coming together or butting up against each other, or what? And then you look at, okay, so what are some possible outcomes, possible solutions, and brainstorm many solutions. And once you've gone through this process, you've actually taken the emotion out of things, you've got it on paper, and you're starting to look at solutions instead of the problem. Because when we're in the problem, we're just increasing the cortisol, etc., and the neurochemicals that are keeping us trapped. But once we start looking for solutions, that's a whole different part of the brain that's working a different set of neurochemicals. And then all of a sudden, then you can go to them and say, look, hey, maybe you can have that conversation from a place of empathy. Whereas if you'd done it beforehand, you may not have been feeling too empathetic or open to listening to what's going on for them. So I think having that really open conversation, but from a place where you are your whole you, not your only emotional you.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Solutions, solutions, solutions. Because we can get caught up in, I've seen it. People get caught up in complaining about what's wrong, and then it's like, what solution do you propose? And then when we go to that prefrontal cortex, and we're like getting out of that emotional brain, and that amygdala calms down, and it's like, okay, now I can actually like be productive,
Yeah.
It doesn't feel
We're not trying to fight each other anymore or
Yes.
survive. We're
Yeah.
actually trying to come up with a way to work together and be in that, the loving environment rather than the fighting environment. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, Robyn, thank you so much for joining me today. I would love for you to share where everybody can find you.
Well, you can go to choosethetwood.com. Or will you put links in this? Because it might be easier to share the links.
I'll do links.
Because the other one, if you want to go straight to the Kind Community Project, it's bit.ly/join the KCP. So, but you can get there from choosethetwood.com.
Yeah, we will put that in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining me. And yeah,
My pleasure.
I'm happy
Thank
to
you very much.
anytime.
Likewise. Thank you very much.